Going through a divorce and a separation can be one of the most traumatic periods of your life, akin to losing a loved one or a partner or a family member. But what people often don't talk about is the financial impact it can have to you, with you. I'm now sitting in actually the Tuscan hills in Italy. I've went through divorce 8 years ago. My life wasn't like this. I've refound love. I remarried 2 years ago. And in this Master Your Midlife morning message, I'm going to talk specifically about how I dealt with the divorce 8 years ago, how it impacted me financially. And this video is specifically for high earning film directors, creative directors and content creators who are going through the same situation, and how the mistakes to avoid, the things that I did that worked, the things that I did that didn't work. And in this video, I'm specifically going to talk about the financial impacts to you, to the best way to navigate this really tough period in your life. In a previous video that you can check out here, I talked about how divorce can affect you mentally and emotionally, and how important it is to keep physically fit during this really tumultuous time in your life. So when it comes to divorce, clearly emotions are high. Clearly, for whatever reason you've decided to separate from your wife, the thing to really focus on mostly is that basically the marriage that once was based upon emotions and connection suddenly turns into a business transaction. I know that sounds pretty cold and harsh, but ultimately, I mean, a lot of people would say that, you know, getting married ultimately is a business transaction. And if you look at it from one angle, it can be that, because you're investing your time in a person that you, at that time, that you loved, that you were committed to, that you think the relationship was going to work in the long haul. But ultimately, once you legally are married, you're bound by law by certain rules in terms of what you own, the assets, the debts that you have. And so when you decide to separate, almost immediately it turns into a business transaction in terms of what you have both acquired when you were married. By law, I mean, I'm not a marriage attorney, I'm not a marriage counselor, but I can talk specifically about what worked for me, what didn't work, what I went through. And I really want this video to help anybody that's going through this period right now in a short way. This isn't a pity party. It isn't about saying, you know, who's right, who's wrong. It's really hopefully going to give you some really concrete, sound, simple advice in terms of how to manage your finances, the things you should absolutely not be doing, and the things that you should be considering straight away. So first and foremost is to get counseling in any shape or form if you can. Marriage counseling sometimes is something that, you know, couples who are separating don't want to do, but for you personally to get financial counseling, to speak to a lawyer or an attorney if you're in the US, depends where you are. And the thing that you want to be looking at straight away is in terms of assets. Do you have the house in both your names? Is the car yours? Is it in your wife's name? Is it in both your names? Literally draw a list of the main assets in your life, from the house to the car to the possessions. The bank accounts, do you have separate bank accounts? Credit cards, do you have a separate one? Do you have one in a joint account in your name? And by law, basically the law states that everything should be divided 50-50 down the line, unless you've had a prenup. Prenups are particularly popular, and they are lawful in the US. They're not so popular in Europe and the UK, but they have become more popular recently. And clearly a prenup is just an agreed contract between you both before you get married, in terms of if you were to split for whatever reason, that person would get this person would get that. And they're actually a pretty good idea. I know people, when they talk about prenups, it's almost like you're determining the end of the marriage before you've even began, but they're not really that. I mean, in a way, it's like you're investing in this person. You're saying to them, look, I care about you, but if anything were to happen with you, it's like life insurance. Then I would want to guarantee that, you know, we both leave this relationship both intact, not, you know, we're both completely in debt and, you know, hating one another. And so whether you've got a prenup or not, that's an aside. But if you don't have one, then by law, really the law looks at what you have in terms of 50-50. So if you have any debts in your name, effectively they're your own. If they're in the joint name, then you own them both. But if you have a credit card, say, you know, you're a film director, you've been working on a movie, you've been doing a creative project, and you've got a big debt on a credit card, that effectively is your own. It's not, you can't split that with your wife. Similarly to the mortgage, if it's in both your names, and effectively wherever, even if you've been earning more, that was the situation with me for many years with my ex-wife, that I was the one that was working in the film industry. I was earning more than she was. And we both had the house in our name. And if you were to look at up the periods of time that we were together, which was over 20 years, I would have put much more money into that than she had. But effectively, at the end of the day, we still decided, we didn't get, the thing that I didn't do was I didn't get lawyers involved. We didn't get an attorney involved. We were on very good talking terms. We were very upset that we were ending the marriage, but we decided from the financial perspective that we were going to divide everything 50-50. I lived in London for 23 years, and we'd sold that house and moved to Glastonbury, and we'd bought a house outright together. So effectively we did decide that when we were going to separate, that the house would be divided down the line 50-50. We eventually did that just over a year ago. I remarried 2 years ago, and I bought half of the house from my wife, who has moved somewhere else. She's in a happy relationship now. She's got her own place, but I stayed in the house that we were owning together, and I bought half of the house with my current wife. That is quite an unusual situation, because one of the things that I wanted to suggest is, when you do separate and divorce, there's a part of you that wants to move out straight away, and I would advise against doing that, really, because it really depends on how tumultuous the relationship is between you, whether you are on talking terms or whether it's got to the point where you can't stand being in one another's company. But ultimately, you really want to give yourself a bit more time and consideration to think about and talk about what you plan to do next. So sometimes one of the things I have seen men do particularly quickly is they want to move out, or the wife wants them to move out straight away. So think twice about doing that, really, from a legal standpoint. Clearly, if children are involved, this is another area that will involve a marriage counsel, will involve lawyers, will involve the courts, and that's a whole different procedure. My wife and I didn't have children. We had lots of animal companions, but clearly the other thing I would suggest doing is you want to be involved in the children's life as much as possible. Whether you were working long hours before and you weren't involved in the life, you've got to, you can look out for the wife actually claiming, well, you weren't around and you weren't looking after them. But as soon as you decide to separate, don't make yourself vacant for the children. Keep yourself, in their life, active, connected. And that's all I can suggest on that term. I've watched a number of YouTube videos that talk about that. I can't talk about it personally, but the one key thing I would suggest, and also from a financial perspective, that you are, particularly in America, there is the law that you need to be offering support for the children, alimony, and that's something else that you can look into as well. Back to the key financial implications of you separating, and there's 3 stages to it effectively. It's like when you decide that you're going to separate. So it's pre the divorce, where you have to negotiate and talk about money and who owns what. And also in that situation, don't agree certain things. Always be open to negotiation. Be careful to say, well, I'll give you this and I'll give you that and I'll do this and I'll do that, when you could be giving something away that you don't actually have to. Stage 2 is when you've actually gone through the legal divorce itself, and then when you're working out who has what, which money goes where, which part of the house, the assets, and then there's the third part of the financial negotiation is when you've actually separated. Then again, as I mentioned earlier, if there are children involved, there might be alimony, there might be support, or there might be other things that have been worked out between you both that needs to continue after you've separated. So there's those 3 financial stages to consider, but the biggest and most important thing to remember is that you have to get your house in order. One thing that certain men do more than women is they try and hide certain assets. You know, particularly if you're a high earning film director, you may have invested money in crypto, in investments, or in other things, or you may have had somebody working with you that's a member of the family, and suddenly you decide, well, I do not want to give up that portion of all of this work that I've done to my spouse. And there'll be some kind of work, there'll be a way that you're trying to figure out to try and hide or do something with that money so it won't be involved in the separation. I would advise against that 100%, because attorneys these days, lawyers these days, they will drill through everything. They will drill through all transactions, and they will ultimately, if they come across money that you've tried to hide from your spouse, then it's just, at the end of the day, that's going to harm you financially more than anything else. And look, I appreciate that this is a tough subject. It's a tricky time to consider, and particularly if you're the person that has been working the most and earning the most. And I don't want this video to be seen as men earn more than women, women earn more than men. I'm specifically talking about men, filmmakers, film directors who have worked in the industry, who have been in a marriage that potentially worked and now isn't working, and what's the best thing to do. Also at this point, clearly, if you're still working on a project, you're balancing your financial life. Bills, if you own a house together, need to be paid. That has to be negotiated on what's going to work moving forward. And so really spend crucial, essential time looking at all your finances straight away. Assuming that you do that already, or you don't do that already. If you don't do that already, then that's the time to get your house in order, to absolutely look at everything that you own, the debts that you have, the commitments that you have, and then hand on heart, you need to then say to yourself and look at in the hard light of day that you may be looking at 50% of that going to your spouse. Whether that's something that you want to approve of or not, that's the reality of the financial situation of divorce and separation. Hopefully, I would want you both to be able to work it out, to have the emotional intelligence to be able to negotiate and talk. But, you know, that said, it's one of those situations that, as I said earlier, there's lots of emotions involved. It's a very tricky situation, and sometimes that's just not how it can work out. For me personally, we decided that we would, because we own the house, but we decided 50-50, that we decided financially we were going to live together for a period of time. I needed time to basically work out my own mental and physical space. I'd lost my father about 4 weeks after we got divorced. So for me, almost like the first year or 2 years, I was effectively in recovery. I was doing a little bit of work here and there, but I decided that I needed to look after myself first and foremost. And we decided that we were going to share the house together, live together. It was a big enough house that we could be in separate rooms and live our separate lives. In hindsight, that seemed like a good idea at the time, but as time went on, because we were in that house together almost like 3.5 years, that wasn't the best decision. I think what we should have done, or what I wish we have done, is that we'd have sold the house earlier, within the first 12 months, and then split it that way, rather than staying together as soon as we did. So that's something that I can share with you. That's what we did. That's what we decided to do. But in hindsight, looking back, it's not that we fought or we had major issues, but just emotionally with moving on, it didn't really, for me personally, can't speak for my spouse. When I started seeing my current wife, I was still living in the house with my ex-wife, and that was an issue for her, clearly. And so that was one of the reasons, if we'd have sold the house earlier and I'd have been able to move out and I'd have met somebody else, that would have worked better. But at the end of the day, we were able to split the house down the middle. I mean, possessions and other things, we'd acquired a lot of art and other things, and early on we went through and we decided, this is yours, that's mine. We had separate bank accounts, we had separate debts, so they were handled that way. And so ultimately, I'm grateful that it panned out the way that it did, and I hope that it can work out for you in terms of what you're going to plan and decide to do. But I hope this video has been useful to highlight some of the pitfalls, some of the things of what not to do. and I hope that you find it within yourself to be able to negotiate with your spouse, talk about these things openly and lovingly in a way that, even though you're separating from a financial business perspective, that it's really important that both of you moving forward feels that you're supported, that one person isn't leaving the relationship, you know, absolutely on their ass and doesn't have, you know, isn't financially supported. But then again, it really depends. I know every situation is different. One of you may have much more money than the other person. So I hope this short video has been useful. And as the sun is rising over San Giammano in Italy and Tuscany, it wasn't really rising for me 8 years ago when I was going through a divorce, but I feel, you know, a privilege now to be able to share some of this information with you. I'm looking forward to doing more of these videos. If you've watched this long take of me sat in the countryside, I know that you're a person that cares about filmmaking, about storytelling, and that you are a person that cares about yourself. You still care about your spouse, even though you're separating, and you want things to work out as best as possible. And in this next video here, I'm going to talk specifically about how people respond to you when you decide to go through a divorce, and how to handle the judgments, how to basically tell your own story and remain true to yourself in a situation that, from the outside looking in, people just maybe or cannot understand why you're doing what you're doing, particularly from family and friends. So love yourself, love movies, it'll love you back, guys. Thanks for watching this video. I look forward to doing another one very soon. Bye for now.